Hi everybody, Matt Lawton here. This is the Astrological Winds channel, and we're going to look at the astrological weather forecast for the week ahead, and that is the week of August 10th through the 16th of 2020. So, what I'm calling this week is a week of adjustments and perhaps a week of some kind of faded mission coming in to your life. First thing is we've got several actors working strongly this week. And first thing I'd like to mention is Mercury. Mercury at this point is moving really quickly. Like it's going like 2 to 2.5 degrees a day. So it's only spending about 2 weeks in a sign when it's moving that fast. So it went into Leo last week, which I briefly mentioned. I just didn't have time to get too deeply into that, what that means. But Mercury's a pretty big player this week, and is combining with Uranus, which, remember, last week was a major player with the full moon and the T-square with the full moon. So Mercury, now that it's moving so fast, is catching up to the sun. Remember, the sun's in Leo, so Mercury is a little behind it, but it's moving real fast. And by about a week from now, the winged messenger will catch up with the sun and have a conjunction. So basically what that means is like they're making aspects together now, as whenever one of them is making an aspect, Mercury right behind it, the sun makes an aspect, Mercury will make an aspect a day or two afterwards. So they're going to activate a lot of stuff. And what, like I said last week, the sun activated Uranus, and we got that full moon, and I said, definitely always expect some unexpected events, not only in your life, but in the world, that can be explosive, upsetting, just change things very quickly. And of course, we had several examples of that, and the number one being the large explosion in Beirut, Lebanon. And that was such a Uranus type of event. I mean, that to me is a perfect example of how Uranus comes in, and there's just an event that people really don't have control over. Many times it's a natural disaster, and the east coast of the United States got a hurricane at the same time. So that was another one of those Uranus type of events that occur. When Uranus comes in, it upsets things, it changes things rapidly. You feel like you're being sucked along into something that you don't have any control of. And of course, like I said too, it also ratchets up your individualistic energy, your need to express yourself in an individual way, which is usually, rebellious, in the sense that you start going against maybe what everyone else or others around you are doing and going for. So Mercury squares Uranus today on Monday. And I said Mercury is now in Leo. So when Mercury is in Leo, he's got a proclamation to make. We all have a proclamation we need to make. We have our pride gets wrapped up in our words. Our egos get wrapped up in our words. So but that being said, you can really you stand up strongly for what you believe in, and you'll still be willing to take in new information, but it's definitely gonna be one of these things where you can get argumentative with others over the things that you are strongly attached to in your mind, your beliefs, your opinions, things like that. But it's really also gives a lot of, like, it gives the mind the ability to lead to, like, where the mind can figure out what to do in situations that are like whatever crisis or whatever it may be. Like, the mind can be very adept at coming up with a plan, mapping out a strategy, knowing what to do. So like when Mercury squares Uranus, it's like plugging, you know, your finger, one finger into a socket and your other finger into another socket, and there's just this charges of energy going through our nervous system and like just jacking us up. So like it can be really exciting, can be really stimulating. You can get like ideas, insights that come to you that are really like exciting, but at the same time too, they can, you know, they can be upsetting to the things that you're used to having going the way you're used to having them go, if you can follow that. So like it can bust up your routines, it can bust up the normal things that you expect. So a lot of people like don't really get into that too much, you know. If they're in a fixed position, you know, it can be very nerve-wracking. So the key is to remain flexible. Now, thing is, Mercury and Uranus get together, it's a combination of the lower and higher minds. So like the download is constant, you know, the flashes of insight and perception are almost like non-stop. There's like, it's like that too much information going through my head, you know, that old, you know, saying that, you know, there's just too much to literally hold on to. So like our thinking processes therefore can get sloppy, and a lot of things can come and go through the mind without getting the proper attention or focus that they really would require to, you know, get the full flowering of what that idea is trying to bring to our senses. So what's important therefore is that if you feel a certain insight is or perception is really important, is to somehow take note of it, because more likely than not your attention is going to be dragged away very quickly by something else. So and the thing is too about Uranus right now, remember last week, and I did the monthly too, it's going retrograde this week on Saturday. So it's really close to standing still. It's basically stationary, and when planets are stationary, their energy is much higher and focused and like out there and able to be seen. So we've been having a lot of these Uranian events, and that will continue this week, and by Saturday Uranus will actually go retrograde, join all the other outer planets. So that's like how our week's gonna start. But then, you know, remember I said it in the beginning of the forecast, this is going to be a week of adjustments, and also a week of possibly getting some kind of mission that you really it would be really hard to duck out of, basically. Like, so in other words, it's almost like a fated thing that you have to deal with. Like, circumstances will force you to become this conduit in a situation where you need to be the vessel that the universe is working through to deal with that situation. It's probably not an option. Or if you duck out of it, you know, it would be so irresponsible that you know, that it almost would be impossible to, because you're going to be sucked along. So what's happening to make that happen is the Sun and Mercury moving together are going to start to quincunx the three planets that are conjunct in Capricorn: Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn. But remember, last week I said one of the biggest aspects this month and actually one of the biggest of the year, that's keeping a little bit of sanity in a pretty insane world, is that Jupiter-Neptune sextile. So the Jupiter-Neptune sextile, what's going to happen this week is, since they're exactly sextile, when the Sun or Mercury quincunxes one of them, it's going to be quincunxing the other too. And what that does is it basically forms an aspect that looks like this, like a point or an arrow point or a finger, like a finger of fate pointing at you. Pointing at you. A hand of fate, a finger of fate, the hand of God, whatever you may want to call it. But remember, the Jupiter-Neptune sextile is all about our values, especially our spiritual values, our religious values, mysticism, and like turning that into like acts of compassion and art and creativity. All those things is what Jupiter sextile Neptune is about. So now the Sun and Mercury are going to come along, and on Tuesday and Wednesday the Sun is going to quincunx Jupiter and Neptune and form what we call the Yod, or hand of fate, finger of fate. And then on Saturday and Sunday, or Friday and Saturday, Mercury is going to do the same thing. So basically all week long, there may be like adjustments you have to make to like your philosophical values and outlook, and like your spiritual life, and how that's fitting in to your current life path and the way you're communicating and connecting with others. So there's a lot of things that maybe Uranus showed, that we're having to deal with from all these downloads that are forcing us to look at those values that we have spiritually and philosophically, and will force us to probably make some adjustments. So flexibility is the key. And like, the danger with Jupiter and Neptune when they get with the Sun, which is the first Yod and the first two quincunxes, is they can dissipate energy. So like the Sun and Jupiter get together, and it can be a little bit like on the arrogant, self-righteous, privileged side, like, I deserve this. Well, you do, if you're willing to give as much as you are wanting to take. So that's the key to that first Yod of like, the adjustment is that, like, yes, you may deserve those things, but you need to actually give as much as you're willing to take. You can't get arrogant and self-righteous just because you may be right about whatever it is you're feeling that way about, and then think, well, because of that, I just deserve this, So if you take on that attitude, that's definitely not the right way to make an adjustment. And like, we can see like the Sun Neptune part will like actually see how like our values may not be working in reality, and like bring us a lot of disappointment and discouragement. And like the Sun is us, so like it's up to us to decide to change that. So there may come some event related to that will actually force you to do that. That's where the hand of fate thing comes in, that if you're not actually like working on that personally, like you may just get like wonked over the head with something that'll be like, okay, well, let me show you the weaknesses in where your value system or philosophy, your way of looking at the world is. So then Mercury comes along and it's the same thing. Mercury with Jupiter can be like can have a lot to say in a very arrogant, self-righteous tone, but can get caught being hypocritical over and over. So if you see yourself doing that, or you see you're, or others are pointing out that to you, then that's more likely what's happening. And once again, Mercury and Neptune will be like, oh, okay, so I'm not doing such a good job living my philosophy out or my value system out, apparently, if that's the reaction I'm getting. So it's like, so like, once again, having to make adjustments with that stuff is the key, is like remaining open-minded and flexible enough to allow in the input to say, oh yeah, that's where I can make this little adjustment along here. Or some event, once again, may come along and force us to do that, to make you like the point in that yod, the point in that hand of fate, the point person that has to deal with a situation that, has to be dealt with. Basically, it just can't be swept under the rug and pretending it's not there. What's interesting at that point, when you continue with the Sun-Mercury style, by the weekend, Mercury will be right on the heels of the Sun at that point, only like a degree or two behind the Sun as we get to the weekend. And then they'll both end up quincunxing Pluto next. Remember, it's Jupiter, Pluto, Saturn in Capricorn right now. So it'll separate from the yod and the quincunxes from Jupiter and Neptune, but then it'll lock into, the two of them will lock into a quincunx with Pluto. And at that point, that's where we get to look inside deeply. And, we may be triggered at that point too. Like the Sun-Pluto quincunx can get us into some pretty extreme power struggles at times if we're not willing to let go of our position and adjust it. And it doesn't necessarily mean that your position is wrong. It just may be in the relationship of where that conflict is coming up, the person or the situation, that it's just not fitting. Like it's like trying to pound a square peg into a round hole, like it's just not working in that situation. So it's not like, oh, give up everything I believed in. It's more like, it's not working in this situation, I need to make some adjustments. Or the other thing that quincunxes will do, there is another option with a quincunx, and that's called separation. You can separate yourself completely from that situation if you choose so. If you feel that that's the right move to make. And many times it is. I know that, that can be difficult for people who are looking to always have peace and harmony with others, but sometimes that's the best way to get it, especially for the time being. So like the Mercury-Pluto quincunx will definitely have us looking really deep inside ourselves to see the opinions and fears and the old patterns that have gotten us to the point where we're at, where we're having to be forced to make some situation work in a new way, or literally let go of the situation completely. So some interesting energy this week, and like I said, there's a real good chance with all the quincunxes, especially with the yods going on, that some outer event is just going to force this stuff on you, and in your world or in the bigger world. So like, and as if it's not already, I know that everybody's dealing with stuff that's just like, bombs dropping off in their life, so, and sometimes that's what we got to think about, is that like, this is going on in everybody's life, and in Beirut it went on physically, so like, thank yourself that you weren't there, and if you were there, you have all my prayers and blessings that your life is better today. So that's some of the main energy going on. But like, remember too, now last week I talked about it extensively. Mars with its first squares to Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn. Well, last week was the square to Jupiter. So this week is the square to Pluto. And the square to Pluto can be something that you have to be really aware of, because it has a tendency to get destructive and violent. And we can bring our own self-destruction to ourselves if we're not careful in this situation. But in a general sense, when Mars and Pluto are in a hard aspect, like they are with a square, which is tension, and that's just really built up to the point where the tension is going to be released in some way or another on a larger scale. Many people will act aggressively, and people who have a tendency to be violent when they're angry will become violent. Places that are, dangerous places to be in a general sense are definitely more apt to be triggered in those situations. So like, Mars Pluto is like, very egotistical. It's very individualistic energy, and it's angry too. It's angry at what it sees, and it wants to strike out and lash out at what it sees. And it wants a purging. It wants to get rid of the dark stuff, and it's willing to, literally fight to do that. What it really wants to do is bring in the creative energy of transformation. So it's very powerful energy, but it's very dangerous energy at the same time to play with. Like, conflict is very, very likely in this situation, but it gives like incredible endurance to, climb to the top of the hill. Whether you're out of breath, you're bleeding, you're bloody, you're bruised, you're battered, but you're still pushing on. You're the warrior who's gonna, get to the top and get to the goal. And it's a long-term thing, and we know that. So it's gonna be very intense energy. Most people are gonna react to this energy in a very confrontational, violent and aggressive way, and it really just wants a cleansing. It really does. So that's we're gonna have a week. Like I told you last week, Mars transits are pretty strong for several days. So this whole week, you'll probably see lots of examples in your personal life, in the social life, in news, the world, of like some very, very angry, aggressive, violent energy. And the other thing I want to mention is Sunday, next weekend, is a very, very complex day. It's interesting. All the players that we're talking about kind of come together on Sunday. So Mercury and the Sun are literally almost right on top of each other by Sunday, and they're actually going to trine Mars that day, and they're also going to trine Eris. So there's like a lot of energy to tap into that day, but it's still very individualistic energy. Like, it's like, hey, and you're in a stationing retrograde that weekend, the weekend too. All that energy is very, very individualistic. So it's not going to be easy to use that energy in like group type situations. It may be best to, just be sunk into your own project. Really, the best way, the only way you're going to really be able to work with groups is if you guys have, if your group has a very common personal goal toward, each individually individual in the group feels really personally invested in, then it can work. But otherwise, it's not the easiest thing to do. But there is a lot of energy available. But there are a couple other things going on. Like I said, it's a complex day. The sun and the sun and Mercury are not only trining Mars and Eris, but they're also sesquiquadrating Chiron. So like blockages to those things are most likely that you still want to do. And then Mercury is semi-squaring Venus, Venus is also squaring Chiron, which once again shows like relationships are not going to be an easy thing to deal with on Sunday. That it's really a day that maybe like, taking a bike ride or a hike by yourself might be the best thing to do, Vesta, the asteroid, is also going into Leo this week too, and once again, that Vesta is all about like groups that you share like ritualistic type behaviors with, and when Leo gets involved in that, it kind of goes against the group a little. So like many people will feel like it's like they're contesting other group members in the groups that they're in during a lot of this time, this week, this month. And but it does also, once again, if we're willing to remain flexible and open to others, give us the ability to be like a leader in groups. And especially in times where especially the quincunxes too, like sometimes like there's like these key moments where someone just knows what the right thing to do at the right time is, and it could be something relatively small seemingly at the time, but that is what to look for this week. Is there like some place where the universe is saying to you, hey, I have the right answer right here for a lot of in a confused situation. I can be the eye of calmness in the center of a storm, and I'm in the storm, and the storm's still getting me wet, and it's still, bolting me with lightning and thundering over my head, but at the same time, I can remain centered when others around me may not be, and like take a leadership position by knowing what the right thing to do at a key moment is. So look for that this week, because I think, for anybody who's like, on a path of expanding their evolution or consciousness, there's a calling going on right now, that Jupiter-Neptune sextile, for you to do that work. It's what I call cosmic surgery, actually, and it's serious stuff. So look for that moment, because you're the conduit in that moment that the universe is acting through, and is calling you to do that. And like I said, I can't imagine that you'd be watching this and you'd want to turn your back on that like responsibility when it happens. So like, it's just, that would not be the right action in that case. All right. I forgot to mention, last week was a great week to see Mercury in the sky early in the morning, but this week, and because we had the full moon last week, the moon is not up early, is like the heart of the best meteor shower of the year. So like last night I went out for like, I finally had a cloud-free night for the first time in several weeks, and I saw 4 meteors within like 10 minutes early, so that the later you stay, the more there are per minute. But coming out of like the northeast sky area, just kind of like lay down or sit and just focus up there, and I'd say within 5 or 10 minutes you'll see some meteors. So yeah, that's a cool thing to see. But Mercury is probably already fading into the dawn light this week, so be able to see him in the evening in a few weeks. So He comes and goes quick. And like I said, he's moving fast right now. All right, look for that special moment. If you need a reading, I am available. My email is mattthue823@gmail.com. Just email me and we can talk about prices. I can work with anybody. And then, and always like to mention it's a free service I'm offering. A lot of positive reactions, and I thank you all for that. Become a follower on the channel so I don't have to social media blitz you. It's a cumbersome, tiresome thing to do that for me. I'm just not adept with the technology thing at times, so it'd be easier for me if you just signed up for the channel. But I will continue to try to bomb some of you unless you don't want me to. Just tell me, hey, stop bombing me with the social media every week. And reminder, I'm already on the channel, or I have no interest in hearing this. Please stop. Cease and desist. But my favor that I ask you for the free service is that if you know of anyone who'd be interested in possibly hearing this, please pass it on. It's free service, and I'd love to have as many followers as possible. So thank you very much for that. All right, until next week, this is Matt Lawton. This is the Astrological Winds channel, signing off. And just look for that moment where you're the actor being called to take your key part. Until next week, namaste.